Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast, the podcast where we chat about all things Porsche. Today is Tuesday, and you know what Tuesday means. Tuesday means Owner's Stories, and this is Owner's Stories number 29. And today I have Luke coming in very shortly, and Luke's coming in from Brisbane in Australia, from my home, not my hometown, but my home country. I'll be going back there very, very soon. So Luke's coming in on Zoom. I'm going to connect with him on Zoom in about 5 minutes, and we'll start talking about his owner's story. I just want to mention, actually, if you want to be on the owner's stories, I am still recording owners. I'm still taking requests, so to speak. Is that what you say? I don't know what I'm talking about this morning. It's always early for me when I do these in the morning. I'm not a morning person. So if you want to be on Owner Stories, just send me a DM. You can send me a DM through Instagram, through PorscheCooled on Instagram. You can send me a DM through michael.bath on Instagram. You can send me a DM at P997.1 on Instagram. I have 3 Instagram accounts. But PorscheCooled is usually the best one to go through. And if you want to be on the Owner Stories, just send me a DM and tell me about your cars, and we'll organize a time in the near future and schedule a time. Like I said, we record all these by Zoom. It's really easy. It's great fun. I really enjoy it. I love chatting to other owners all around the world. I mean, we've had so many different people now. It's so many different owners and so many different types of Porsches. It's been fantastic. Anyway, enough of me rambling on first thing in the morning. Let me start up Zoom and let me get Luke on to talk about his PorscheCooled owner story. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Like I said, this is Owner Stories. And today, Luke has now joined me through Zoom, and Luke is in Brisbane in Australia. Like I said, where I come from. I'll be back there very shortly. It's afternoon, isn't it, Luke? Good evening. Good evening, Luke. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Michael. Yes, it is evening. It is a balmy 7 p.m. First day of April. So what's that? Well, is that an autumn? We wouldn't know in Brisbane. We don't get that sort of weather, but yeah.
Yeah, Brisbane's always nice and warm. That's for sure. I haven't been up there for many, many years. So, Luke, I just tell the listeners how we got in contact. Like most people, when they want to be on Owner Stories, as I said, Luke's reached out to me through Instagram, and I apologize to Luke now because I actually took a long time to getting around to recording Luke's episode due to things that were happening in Bahrain and then coming back to London. But we've managed to meet up now, which is good. So, Luke, I think let's just get straight into it. And as you know, the question I always like to start the podcast with is, when did you... I'd like to start Owner Stories with, actually. What were your first memories of seeing a Porsche or a 911? Did you have any, family growing up or friends or fathers of friends or anything, anyone that owned a Porsche? When do you first remember seeing a Porsche and thinking, maybe one day I'd like to own one of those?
It's much like many of my contemporaries about my age. I'm just around 40 years old, and we grew up essentially reading and rereading Unique Cars magazine. It was generally, your father's issue, and you read it front to back to front, because you didn't have the luxury of being able to look up online if you're interested in the car. That was your resource material, was that, and a couple of other things that came via the news agency, but that was essentially it. And from that, it was just cars, a fascination with cars. And essentially, I was a little bit miffed by Porsches as a younger man, because I used to know they were valuable, but they weren't flashy. And it was sort of a bit of a value confusion scenario for me. Then as I grew older, I sort of, fed my habit of cars, and I ran through a load of, dicey secondhand sort of European cars. I've had probably 40 cars to this point. I have 5 cars at the moment that I own and drive regularly. But okay. Generally, I went through a series of Lexus motor vehicles, because if you are trying to run a premium vehicle on a non-premium budget, a Lexus was a very good option. So I went through that spell, and we ended up with about 11 of those. And wow. Then, over the years, all different models.
So what was it? The quality, was it? You like the quality of the Lexus because it is
Yeah, Michael, you can drive a 20-year-old Lexus that's been maintained by a good, mature owner that generally has one or two or three Lexuses, and you can pick them up for a fraction of what they cost new. But compared to say a 5 Series or an E-Class Mercedes, there's still a good chance that everything works. It's a Japanese car. It's a little generally more basic, or the performance probably not as strong, but just they don't break nearly as much as some of the Asian European stuff. And it was just appealing to be able to get those cars and enjoy them and run them on a fairly tight budget. So that worked out quite well. And then as I sort of moved on and left the job and moved into business, there was a very I can pinpoint the Porsche thing specifically where it really started was in, I think, 2016. I was on a trip to Melbourne with my wife and I booked the new Mustang through Hertz.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Melbourne Airport, booked the Mustang. No one had really driven it to that stage, but the problem was the previous renter had not returned it.
Okay.
So I was told by the young lady there that, look, we can't help you out with a Mustang today, and I was feeling a little disappointed because I booked it. And not that Mustangs are terribly exciting to me now, but at that point it was like, this was something we hadn't really seen in Australia for a little while, and it was, it was quite interesting. So, and they went back in the office and had a little discussion. They came out and said, Luke, would you like the Porsche? And I very quickly said yes, and it was a base 981 Cayman with essentially no options except for some black painted wheels. It was a silver car, and that was it. I left that trip and came back and did whatever I could to try and acquire Porsches, and that's it's been that way since.
Okay, so you've been driving a lot of Lexus. You've been driving the more sport versions of Lexus, or just the sort of more comfortable saloons or the SUVs. What were you driving in Lexus?
Well, I'm quite tall, but I have had pretty much every variant of Lexus available, all the way from the full size, like the V8 limousines, your LSs, to your 5 Series size GSs, and all the way down to hybrid hatchbacks that I bought new for my wife and that sort of thing. So we went through, and I did all the track days. I've been to lots of Lexus track experiences. I've been in an LFA with Alan Jones and done laps and all this sort of stuff. So I was, and I still am a big fan of the brand, but it's just after that experience in the Cayman, and I understood that was the base sports car that they sold new. And I thought, if this is the entry point, this is something that I need to be interested in, and it's gone on from there.
So you've hired this car, you hired this car, you drive it, you get into it. What was the first thing you noticed compared to all the Lexuses that you've driven? What was the main thing that you thought, hang on, I do need to buy a Porsche, I do need to find something? What was one of the main things that you noticed?
There isn't really like, I do, to sort of clarify, I drive a lot of different cars, so I'm comfortable getting in anyone's car and driving it. I sort of know my way around, so I don't have to really familiarize myself. It's sort of a byproduct of just driving a lot of cars. And as soon as I got in, it was just, it's an occasion. It's something that it's the typical thing that if you park it somewhere, you turn around to look, you drive around. The beauty of those 981s, and we might even touch on this later, is that is a fantastic sports car. Because of the performance level being a little lower, you can drive through the Kias with that PDK and just punch the next gear and hear that engine right over your shoulder. And that was back when it was a 6-cylinder, obviously. Yeah. And it sounded amazing, and it just really practical. We've got like a full-size roll case in the front, just in the front boot, and it's just a magnificent time in the car. Like, it was good for all occasions, and because there is sometimes a little stigmatism, with the more expensive Porsche models, and generally I get a bit of that with my Cayenne GTS. I don't think other drivers look at me with much affection, but with the Cayman, I got a lot of positive feedback, and lots of people. It's almost like it was the new Porsche sports car of the people sort of thing, maybe a little bit more attainable than something a bit more precious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Caymans are great. The 981 Cayman, like you said, the 6-cylinder, the Cayman, all the Boxster. Stephen from Sydney, who's been on, who had the 981 Boxster in manual in the Guards Red. I mean, fantastic car. He loves that car. If people are searching for a Boxster or a Cayman and don't want to have that IMS issue, as you know, with the 986, 987, they would look at the 981 in manual. Obviously, they're a bit more expensive. But so when you go back to Brisbane, then do you think, okay, I want to get a Cayman, or this is what 2017, 2018? Do you think I want to get a Cayman, or you think I just want a Porsche? What do you start searching for, Luke?
At the time, I was driving a CLS Mercedes, a shooting brake, which was a very well-equipped car with the air suspension and all the different things, and had the full, pilot service that drive you down the road and steer and stop and start for you and everything. So it was quite a nice car. But I just kept driving. I go everything from driving the way we sort of have cars at home. I'll have a couple of company cars and a couple of extra cars, and generally utes, and have sort of cars for occasion, if that makes sense. So I had looked at a couple of 996s at dealers, which in retrospect I wish I'd looked at closely, because given the way the value sort of crept up, there were probably some reasonable cars, but I dismissed them because I'm quite fussy. And a 996 can look quite tired quite quickly with the interior materials and whatnot. So, I looked at them and I drove them, and a lot of them were tips and not really what I was looking for. And then I came to a tipping point. It'll be 2 years in August, where I was just about to pull the trigger on a black 981 from the Porsche Centre Melbourne. And I dealt with the gentleman down there, and everything was, the transaction went really smoothly. It was great value, super low kilometres, warranted car, like a Porsche-approved vehicle. And then I got to the point where I've got, my kids are older, so I don't necessarily have my sons in the car with me anymore, but my daughter's only 13. And we had our exhibition show holiday that August. And I thought to myself, if I buy this Cayman now, I will have to go home and swap cars constantly to accommodate. It was the public holiday. We went out as my wife and I go out together quite a bit, but it was like we wouldn't be able to take my favourite car out if this situation arose, which is a little bit short-sighted of me at the time. It probably might not have been the best decision thinking back. But
because it's a two-seater, right? You
two-seater.
Wanted the back seats.
Yeah, so I went away from that, and through a local contact at a Mercedes dealer, I actually came across my Cayenne GTS, which is the N2A model, naturally aspirated 4.8 litre V8. Okay. Which has the full Alcantara with the carbon, the 21-inch wheels, air suspension, massive brakes, hugely powerful car. And I lived happily ever after with that car for a little while. So I didn't regret the decision. I still drive the car.
So this was your first Porsche then? The Cayenne was your first?
That was it. Yeah, the GTS.
So that was it. So you were looking at the 981. You skipped on that, and you bought something that was a bit more practical, but it still had performance, obviously, because you bought the GTS. It kind of makes sense to me, actually, because you bought the GTS because the interior of the GTS is obviously a step above the standard Cayennes or standard Porsches. That's sort of going to your Lexus thing, isn't it? Where you like the nice interiors, because you've come from Lexus, and Lexus do interiors very, very well. The quality of materials. Sorry, Luke, just 1 second. I just want to tell the listeners, though, because I think this part's going to be interesting. When you bought, I just want to tell the listeners that Luke has a business in Brisbane called New Car Concierge. If you go to his Instagram and have a look, I think there's a picture of your Cayenne on that and your 911 when we get to it. So it's at New Car Concierge. So go over and have a look at Luke's Instagram and give him a follow. Did you have that business when you bought the Cayenne, or was that pre you starting that business?
I was just getting into that business. So I was just getting my license. And this all leads, there's all these sort of strange coincidences. Often with life, you get pushed down this path, and actually coming back to, not to make this, a big Lexus themed PorscheCooled episode, but I helped a friend find an NX, a little SUV. And after he picked the car up, Lexus sent me a check. And I thought, hang on a second, I don't mind this. And then that was sort of the starting point. And I had a service background. I was with the airlines for a long time and sort of a customer service expert, if you will. So we sort of combined that, and I got a business partner together who sort of focuses on the technical side of things and carrying car buying into sort of the 21st century and beyond, because that's the transitioning space. But we were just stepping into that. I've just been licensed, and I had this contact at the Mercedes dealer, and they had the car, and I'd driven it, and I was sort of hot and cold on it because I really didn't need an SUV, but I liked the performance aspect. But the specification on the car was what was important, because my GTS, it's a non-sunroof car, Alcantara interior, headliner, all carbon. It's got radar cruise control, which is huge because I live.
What year was it, Luke? What year is the Cayenne?
It's a 14.
2014.
Yeah, it's a 2014.
Okay.
That's critical.
Let's just go back, though. You're looking at it. It's at a Mercedes-Benz dealer.
Correct.
How do you? I mean, we all know Cayenne's it's got air suspension, correct? So air suspension, you know, does fail.
Yes.
Not as much as it does on Range Rovers, but air suspension does fail. So how do you make sure this Cayenne? Because Cayennes are very expensive to repair, right? They're quite expensive if things go wrong.
That's right.
So how do you check this car out? How do you make sure that it's right? Do you trust the Mercedes-Benz dealer? How do you go about it?
Well, all these performance SUVs can be ruinously expensive to keep under any circumstances. They're big tires, they're heavy cars, heavy componentries, lots of different systems. The reason I was able to buy that car, and I would never purchase a premium SUV like a Cayenne or something that has that much power, or a Turbo S, or any sort of late model Porsche for that matter, without the opportunity to use their extended warranty. So my car, I've just picked it up from warranty work from the Porsche Centre Gold Coast today. So it was there overnight. They gave me a brand new Cayenne E hybrid to take home, and
okay.
So you can extend that warranty for up to 15 years at your cost. So it makes it a much better ownership proposition to do that.
Up to 15 years, right? I thought it was only 10, so you can do it for 15
they extended
years.
it.
So how much? So you don't have to divulge the cost, but the cost of this warranty each year, does it go up 10%? Does it stay the same? How does the price increase when you get to close to, like 10 years old or 12 years old? What is the pricing of these warranties?
I don't think the price increases. The thing is, you are on the hook to maintain the car. So you do have to go through the Porsche service when you do need a service, but the service intervals are long. The service that you get from the dealer is fantastic. They always, apart from the current market, if you're not aware, there's no new Porsche sports cars to drive or to borrow or to look at. If you turn up to a Porsche dealer around these parts, it's just Taycans, Macans, and Cayennes. All the 911s are sold. They sold 9 new 911s to order last week. And generally before COVID, I'd get a 718 and drive it for a few days, and Boxsters, Caymans, everything. And yesterday I ended up with a Cayenne E hybrid. But
it's interesting though, isn't it? The stock of Porsche at the moment, the order process. Like people are saying, the new GT3 is coming out and it's going to be hard to get an allocation. But by all accounts, worldwide, UK, US, and now you're saying Australia, is that even if you want a 911, even if you want a 992 911, it's very hard to get one. It's very hard to test drive one. It's very hard to get one.
Yeah.
The demand is just so great, and obviously. Yeah, and obviously their production has slowed a little bit due to COVID and due to what's happening in Europe, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The demand is, for a little old dealership on the Gold Coast to sell 9 911s, and not all of them Carreras, there was a decent proportion of Turbo S's, and in Australia that's a $500,000 proposition, by the time you order one of those. So there's a very different set of economic circumstances happening around car buying at the moment. Yeah. So it's eye-opening.
So you've got the Cayenne, you've got the GTS, Cayenne GTS. You still own it today, right? You haven't got rid of that car. You just said you've taken it in for a service.
Yeah, no, I will own it for the foreseeable future.
And so have under warranty, we don't really have many SUV chats on this. Some people like them, some people don't. But have you had many issues with the car that have been fixed under warranty? Any things that are huge flags that would have cost a lot of money if you hadn't have had the Porsche extended warranty?
Not really. They due to their diligence picked up that I had a noisy power steering pump. Now I wasn't aware there was any issues, but they found an issue and they fixed it. I'm not sure of the cost of that repair because it was a warranty thing. I was enjoying their 718 Boxster, I think it was, for about the week that I had it, and they returned the car beautifully cleaned and with a new power steering pump. But I've got to think that's probably about $5,000, that repair, so it pays for the warranty.
Yeah, definitely pays off.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say there is a reputation. If it were me offering Cayenne buying advice, having had that car for 2 years, I wouldn't run out and buy a Cayenne for $30,000 with high kilometres. It's like anything. You need to just do your due diligence, and if you can get one with this extended program, it gives you the opportunity to buy it gets you in the door of the Porsche ownership almost as if you were a new car buyer. You get many of the same perks, but for a fraction of the cost. And it would be the same across band. If you bought an AMG Mercedes SUV or an X5M or anything else, you'd be paying similar costs.
And the condition of the warranty is basically you have to service it at Porsche main dealers, right? That's basically the condition. And you can't really modify the car too much, correct?
Yes. Whether or not you have to service it to Porsche standards, so you have to fit genuine parts and it has to be done. So if I did a brake job, they wouldn't be terribly upset if they didn't do it, but it would need to be done by someone qualified, and they would need to use genuine parts. And that's, as for the modifications, a very nice Cayenne S rolled into the service department today while I was there that had the lowering module, which you can do on the air suspension. And you can park my car low, but you can't drive it low. It'll come back up to the slightly higher than low stage. Okay. And I said to my service advisor, I said, if I install the lowering module, you guys are out. And he said, yes, we're out if you do that. So I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So there's limitations. All right. So you've got the Cayenne, you've got the GTS, you're driving around in it. It's got a lot of power. When do you start thinking, okay, I wouldn't mind a 911? Or what comes next? Was that what came next, the 911?
Yeah, essentially it did. There's always sort of something floating around, and a lot of times if a customer potentially buys a new car, I might trade their car if it's something interesting and drive it. And I'm not a second-hand car dealer by any means. I've never really wanted to get into that field. I like to just help people navigate the space into something new. But, if they have an existing car and it appeals to me, I might, buy it off them or whatever happens. But with the 911, it was generally doing what I do every single day, and that's look through car sales the same way you do.
Yeah. It's a habit. It's a habit.
Yeah, it's a habit. So if I'm waiting for someone, I won't say sitting at traffic lights, but, if I have a spare second, I have all my favorite searches and I really, really follow the market. I follow it very closely from everything from, Toyota Land Cruisers to Porsche 911. So
okay, so this 911 which will be in the title, people will see it, but this 911 that you found, was that the one that you were looking for? Were you particularly looking for this model or this variant, or were you looking for something else?
I was looking for a car that wouldn't upset the flow or the budget of what we have on cars. We generally have I've got the Cayenne, I've got a new 330 M Sport here that just turned up a couple of months ago. So I didn't essentially want to overdo it. Actually, going back a step, when I had that Mercedes CLS, the gentleman I sold it to had a 997 Carrera S in Atlas Grey. It was a tip, but it was an extended leather car, and it was beautiful, Mike.
Yeah.
It was absolutely beautiful. So before I bought the Cayenne, he had said to me, he's still a good friend of mine and a Porsche fan. He's got a 944 Turbo, but he said, Luke, I went to his house to drop off the CLS he bought from me, and I saw this Porsche, and he said, I'll sell it to you. So I agreed to buy it, but he got cold feet and then essentially sold it probably 12 months later. So that was that's difficult for me to process daily. But that car would have worked out fantastically because he looked after it so well. It was moderate kilometres. I think it was around 100,000, so maybe a little bit higher, but the sort of price we were talking about and the condition of the car and the extended leather and the way he looked after the paint, I mean, that would have been a much better proposition than the GTS and the 996 put together. It would have been fantastic. But
Right.
C'est la vie.
So you missed out on that, and then you're looking through car sales, you're thinking, okay, I want something within budget. And we all know they used to be. They're not now, but I just saw it, and I don't know whether you saw it, Luke. I just saw a 996 Carrera on car sales that just came up, 70-odd thousand kilometers, and they want $79,000 for it.
Yes.
So the prices are going very up very quickly.
I'm not sure they will secure that money for that car, but it's worth a try because the 997 prices have gone up so much in this country. You're sitting there in sunny England making money on a daily basis on your car.
This is the thing, I have been really, and I actually mentioned this in the podcast that's coming up on Friday. Well, we're recording this in advance, but I mentioned this in a previous podcast, that those two on car sales, those two 997 Carreras, I still I can't believe they're 125,000. They want 125,000 for them. And this is because I've just gone through the process with Porsche Insurance of trying to get them to up the market value of my car with little luck, with a bit of luck, but not complete luck, because there's no way they would insure it close over 100,000. No way in the world. So it'd be interesting to see if these two cars sell, because I do know that Classic Throttle Shop a while back had a base Carrera for around 109 or 105. Which sold. So I don't know whether he sold it at the asking price, but it definitely did sell.
Yeah, the market's strong. Lorbeck had a really nicely optioned, had the carbon buckets. It was a white Carrera S, and it was a Series 1 car. Everything was moderate about it, except it had the nice aero kit. It was 150. It was on there for 2 days. Like it wasn't, I'm not sure if you saw that car, but if that sold for anywhere near asking, that is a very strong result.
Yeah, I didn't see that. But I mean, in Australia in general, I was looking for the international listeners, they're probably getting a bit bored with this, but I was looking at, I think, GT3 RSs, 991s and things like that. I think they were on Porsche Forums Australia. People were talking about it. And then you click on the link and they've already gone. The cars have already sold. Yeah. So the market's obviously really, really strong. And maybe this comes back to the point where it's hard to get new allocations of cars and people are looking at, still looking at, the previous generation. I still think the previous generation of the GT3 is still better than the new one, in my mind. I still think it's still the one to look for, the 0.2, 991.2.
Yes, I agree.
So you're looking for a 996.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find it, and what do you find? Tell the listeners how you found this car and what it was.
Okay, so as it turns out, the car was at the lower end of the scale because it was a cab. It had the hard top. It was a completely standard car. Okay, completely standard. It looked a little sad, to be honest. It's Arctic Silver over Metropole. It has about 140,000 kilometres. As the 17s that came, the base 17s. The thing about it, though, was the provenance of the car. So the previous owner had owned it since it was 2 years old. There was a massive file on the car from all the known shops in the area. Everything that could have been done to this car was done. And without going into too much details, the previous owner of my car is purported to own a Carrera GT, a 918 Spider, a 996 GT3, a 997 GT3, an F40, a 300 SL. Has one of the best collections of, and this is their family car. So I got to know them a little bit. And they're really fantastic people, and it just, as you guys talk about quite often on the podcast, sort of, buying, it's, what is it you're doing with the seller? You're buying the seller?
The seller, yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially it, because I'll tell you, I didn't do a PPI on this car.
Okay, so he was the person selling the car. You bought it directly from him or from a dealer?
I bought it privately from the son, so from the family. Family, yeah.
And they still have the family. They still have all these cars. They still have the Carrera GT.
A multi nation car collection and everything. They're big in the local Porsche club and everything like that, and do a lot of motorsport and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But fantastic, really enthusiastic people that know more about Porsche than, they've forgotten more about Porsche than I'll ever know, I would say. But low key, you won't find all these cars on Instagram or anything, but they, it's good to have, to know that the car's been looked after really well. No matter what price you pay for a 911, keeping a 911 is a completely different proposition. And as soon as I got the car, and we negotiated on that, and I picked the car up, I have just extensively modified it since it turned up. So
okay, so let's talk about that. So you didn't get a PPI. I mean, that's it's understandable. You spoke to the owner, you trusted them, and it had a great service history, though, like you said, right? It had a fantastic service history.
Extensive receipts on the car. And part of the negotiating was not getting a PPI. It's basically, you're selling a car, I can make your life easy and just pay you this amount of car and disappear off into the sunset, and not be a pain in their backside. And that makes a big difference to a seller.
Yeah, I don't want you to tell you don't have to tell the listeners how much you pay for the car, but was it in the low range, the medium range, or the high range based on 996 prices at the time?
It was in the low range.
Okay. All right, so it's got quite it's got a reasonable amount of kilometers on it. It's not that heavy. It's got a reasonable amount of kilometers on it, which, for a 996, we all know, and well, we don't know, but it's said that if it's a well-driven 996, and the IMS issue hasn't appeared, then it may not ever happen. You know what I mean? It might be just one of those things that never happen. So in all these repairs to the car, Luke, had the IMS been upgraded, had things like clutch, etc., been changed, or was it pretty much, you had to start from scratch and start fixing things?
No, everything had been done just by pure repair. So essentially, I think the synchros in the gearbox went out at some point. So the gearbox came out, new clutch, a full overhaul. One of the heads on the engine caused an issue. So there's a receipt for, I think, probably over $20,000 for the rebuild of that engine at some point. And it wasn't an IMS-related failure, and the car still, the people that look after the car for me for the work that I'm not doing, they were the ones that know that car inside out. They were the ones that, the gentleman that was doing some work on my convertible roof a month ago, he was the one that actually rebuilt the engine on the car. So it's nice to know that, you've got people that are familiar with it. It's very important when you're dealing with these cars is to trust the people that are working on them.
Absolutely.
Important.
That's great. It's great that it was a locally delivered car and you've still got all those, all those people around you that you can actually, use and draw upon. So that's fantastic. And It seems like if the previous owner owned the car for that long, they must have been very happy with it as well. I mean, that's always a good sign that the car has been a great car because they've owned it for so many years, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So, all right, so you take delivery. This is your first 911. It's a 996 Cabriolet. Tell the listeners how it felt when you first went for a drive in it. Did you think about that 981 that you hired in Melbourne, or was it a completely different experience? How did it feel?
Well, it was funny, actually. The day that I collected it, I was still driving a brand new 718 brand new 718 Boxster.
Okay.
And so I went to pick it up, and the seller was a little confused because I turned up in a brand new Porsche sports car, black with the wheel upgrade, and it looked magnificent. And he was selling a kind of tired-looking 996. But I took one of my employees with me, who's actually a mechanic by trade, so he helps me with all my car stuff when we do these sorts of things.
Okay.
And we went for a little drive through the hills and took it back. To be honest, I didn't gel with the car probably straight away because it doesn't smack you in the face as ultimate performance and everything. I was surprised by how long the gearing was with the manual. I'm very particular, so some of the finishes on the interior or the seats, I wasn't particularly excited about that. I knew the wheels were they were underwhelming, and I was just desperate to get to work on it essentially. But for how long I've been dreaming. I really never honestly thought it would be feasible to have a 911. Like it is I know it's a 996, but it's definitely a 911. So
But it's a manual. It's a manual, right? So you said it was gearing. So you've got a manual 996. So you've got the right transmission.
Yep.
So you've got this car. You already know that the gearing's a bit long, the shifter's a bit long. You need something to fix that up. So what do you start thinking about? What are the things that you've done? Tell the listeners, because everyone's really interested in this side of it. What did you start thinking about? What were the mods you started thinking that, hang on, I really want to do this?
Well, I wanted to clean up the interior. So the car had the detachable hardtop, and I don't really like the way it looks, and it's not particularly nice when you're driving around because the hardtop moves in one direction and the car moves in another, and it squeaks. It's generally the way. They're really well designed and they're trimmed beautifully on the inside, and some people like the way it looks. But it was just a matter of once I got it, I wanted to get it off, but I knew that the rear window on the soft top was in poor condition and it wasn't really weatherproof. And this was all disclosed during the buying purchase. We clearly pointed out everything it needed. There was a bruise on the front bar. The rubber apron on the pop-up spoiler was perished. There was some other little bits and bobs. So I just went through wheels and tires. I extensively have bought most of the things for this car through chance encounters, Facebook Marketplace, Suncoast Porsche, and sort of everything in between. And where we've ended up.
So what was the first thing you did? The very first thing you said, I can't live with this.
Yeah,
was it the interior or the wheels?
It was the wheels. I fitted a set of 18-inch Carrera, the 996 Series 2 wheels with track tires that I bought from a Boxster Spider owner on the Gold Coast.
Okay.
So, the listeners will be familiar
There's
with
no
that.
picture on your Instagram of those wheels, is there? No, I can't see it.
No, they weren't on for long. I think they're they're just the standard sort of 5-spoke. You'll know they're an 18 versus a 17-inch.
Oh,
and they're a little bit wider and they fit a little better. So they were nice. Then after that, I moved to in 996s, I really like the GT3 console delete. Because I'm taller, I need that little bit of extra space for the clutch articulation.
Yes.
So I removed the console and then bought the trim piece from Suncoast. I've got the classic flat bottom dash now. I got some new floor mats, just anything I could to really jazz the inside up, just by adding little knickknacks and little receiver caps for the hard top. Got new ones of those. Fitted the 997.
So, sorry, Luke, you said your interior was grey? Is it the grey colour interior?
No, it's Metropole. It's navy.
It's navy.
Arctic silver with Metropole, which is the navy.
That's a nice combination.
Yeah, navy roof. So it is nice. Although, again, the 996, the non-leather interiors, the ones with sort of just the vinyl dash and the door cards, they are condition dependent, I would say. If you've got a very nice one, they're nice, and if you've got a shabby one, it's shabby. So, and I'm somewhere in between. I'm still to do a full. I've been so furiously modding the car, I haven't had a chance to give it the full, thorough, toothbrush out detail that it's due.
Yeah.
So,
the problem with 996s when you always look at them, I don't know what it is about the 996 because the 997s never look this bad. It's always the bolster on the driver's seat is always in really bad condition. And maybe that's just because it's a little bit older than the 997, but it always seems to look bad on a lot of 996s that are advertised. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's hard to take a good interior photo of a 996, I sort of believe. But it certainly dressed it up doing the console delete. I replaced the head unit. It had a non-Bluetooth little Alpine. I swapped it out. It was like a $200 thing, but at least now I can, play the podcast in the car, listen to your fantastic podcast while I'm driving through the mountains or whatever, and then now I can do that wirelessly instead of having a wire running around. So that's been done. And the big change for the interior was replacing those seats, which are not very supportive, a little small, and they're not really sports car seats, to be fair. I don't know. They're not really great. And I was lucky enough to find the Recaro GT3 seats. So that was a big one.
Oh, you put GT3 seats in the car? 996 GT3 seats?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. So if you look carefully in some of those photos, you'll see it has the
fantastic.
big, harness receivers and stuff.
Yeah, the console
Yeah.
delete is very clean. I do like that when you see it in 996 GT3s. When you see that console delete, it does actually look makes it look more sort of air cooled, I guess, in a way.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
So how was the seat thing? Was that an easy fit? Was it just a complete just a switch over? There was no issues with changing the seats out?
No issues at all. It's basically 4 bolts, the same 4 bolts because they're designed for the car. And I actually bought them from a gentleman who had a highly modified 996 turbo, but he was just a different shaped human to me. And I'm a little sort of taller and they fit me well. And he was sort of more stocky and powerful. And he just said they held his legs in a uncomfortable position. So he went to great expense to fit a different set of Recaros and get the seats all adapted for his liking and had these seats in near perfect condition, genuine 996 GT3 seats, and it's a no-brainer. They go in and transform the car.
The obvious question here, Luke, and I'm sure other people are listening to this thinking the same thing. These seats can almost be the price of a car. These GT3 seats are not cheap. I mean, 997 ones are not cheap. So obviously you got these at a pretty good price, right, to be able to switch them out because they're expensive seats.
They buy what you, and it's the theme for the car because we'll move on to something else, which is also, I got very lucky. Let's just say that. I got very lucky, and they are, I had to, make sure they were genuine because I understand there are some copies floating around the market, but to be able to find them on Facebook and actually physically go to someone's house and look at them, sit in them and everything, because a lot of these parts, like you have to order them sight unseen, you don't know, you've got transport risks, there's all these different scenarios you could face. And with something like that, it was just, that situation was never going to arise again. And I was already very disappointed with the standard seats. So to be able to upgrade and get those, it's,
So what did you do with the seats that were in the car? Are you hanging on to them for if you ever sell a car again, or did you just sell off the seats?
I'm holding on to them. They weren't in bad condition. They were generally pretty good, and they're sitting in the shed basically because those seats that are in there, they might not suit someone, or I might end up with a hardtop 996 at some point. We might play a bit of seat shuffle or who knows. But at the moment, they combined the seats with the 997 short shift kit that I bought from Suncoast. Okay. And the way the car's set up with the chassis, which we'll get to, it's transformative. It has made such a difference to the driving experience.
So I don't know whether you know my story with the short shifter kit. When I first got it, I wasn't that impressed by it with the 997 short shifter kit. That's what I put into my car that Autohouse Hamilton fitted. I've changed my mind now. I think it is good, but I think I was tainted because of Steve's numeric shifter in his GT3. It was just so much more mechanical. Are you happy with the short shifter once you put it in? You got it fitted and you were happy with the throw?
It's an acquired taste. You sort of have to flick gears. If you try to push them in, it's a different movement. But then once you get in, and I was in the mountains the other day and I drove it back to back with an E92 M3, a manual car that my friend has, and it was very interesting, the two different shift actions. The 996 is definitely more, hesitant shift, but you can still shift quickly and it's satisfying. I don't want it to be too easy, it's nice, you've got to get it right.
But I think, Luke, for the 996, it's a bigger upgrade, isn't it, the 997 short shifter kit? Because the 996 throw is actually longer than the standard 997 throw, so I've been told.
Yeah, that's right. So, no, it was a very noticeable. And each time you can exchange a used part for a new one. It wasn't a very expensive upgrade. To stick that in made a huge difference, and it just freshened the car up. It's all about, a 22, 23-year-old car feeling as fresh as it can be. So,
well, usually I would say, and you probably heard me say it before, usually I would say the three key options are, the short shifter, the wheels, and the sound and the exhaust. But you've kind of thrown a fourth one in now with the seats, because I'm picturing your cab and I'm picturing it with those GT3 seats and with the console delete, and I think that looks, that really just changes the whole look of the car. So
yes.
Let's go on. So what wheels do you have on the car now? Because I saw your picture on Instagram and they look like they're pretty big. So what did you change the wheels to?
The wheels are 997 GT3, or they actually came from a GT3 RS. So they're hollow spoke, genuine wheels, 12 inches in the rear. They could be 8.5 in the front, and then they're 19-inch. And they're black, factory black paint. And they have the Porsche crest caps at the moment, and they'll probably stay like that for a little while, but they are magnificent wheels. I am in love with the wheels on my car, even static, just sitting there. They are a thing of beauty. So I'm very happy.
And they fit the 996 okay?
No, they don't. No.
Okay. So what are the issues with the size?
The issue is they're far too wide. So on the rear. So they come fitted with a 305 3519. So yeah, we had to come back to a 295. It might be 30, it might be a 30 profile, but they're a 19 and a 295. And the Michelin tire has a much more upright sidewall than some other brands. So when I switched in the rear, I've actually running a Kumo on the rear at the moment. I'm just trying out things. So what we did is I picked up again from Facebook some Gambala Coilovers. You know the tuning brand Gambala that made all those horrific acquired taste modified 911s in the 2000s?
Yeah, very acquired taste. Yep.
Yeah. So the coilover kit is actually a H&R coilover kit that's just been painted red and Gambala put on it. And it was a used kit that someone was trying to put on a custom race car or something. Never did it. They had no kilometers on them. I bought them for $500, put them in the car. That helped tip these wheels in to the point that they almost cleared. And then I went to Aussie Auto, bought a guard roller and used a heat gun and just lightly rolled it because there's a big lip on the inside of a 996 rear. So we run I think it's a 10 mil spacer on the front, and on the back there's no spacer, just a bit of camber and the 295 tires, which is not overly stretched, but just it has a little bit of angle on the sidewall. And
so
it fits
how does it drive now then?
Magnificently. There's no scraping. There's nothing. It's direct. It drives fast. It's, really, really good.
Even on those mountain roads outside of Brisbane there?
Perfect. I just did the Glorious and Nebo run the other day, and the thing that I was probably wanting at this stage is maybe some brakes, and I haven't given the brakes a hard time, so I don't know whether or not it's just not a very strong, responsive pedal, or whether or not I'm actually running out of brakes. But it was great.
All right, so you've done the console delete, you've done the short shifter kit, you've changed the GT3 seats, you've put the GT3 wheels on.
Yeah. Anything
else?
A load of sort of maintenance, so things like engine mounts, brake fluid flush, service items. Made sure everything on the car works. I actually did the center console when the front bar got taken off for paint. It had a big bruise on it, so I had that fully refurbished and repainted. I actually took the center console out and had that painted body color as well. That's a popular standard option.
That looks that's a great thing on the 996. I think that's a must to do on a 996. If I ever bought a 996, I would do that too. I think it just improves it, because that center console in the 996 always looks a little bit dodgy, doesn't it? It never holds up very well. And when it's painted in body color, it always looks, I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, so that was a big improvement. That really lifted things. So we did that. I did the exhaust, the Gundo hack, the YouTube exhaust mod, the pipe that got welded in. So that's been done. So the exhaust sounds really good now.
So Luke, you had that done in a muffler shop in Brisbane, or they just did the hack for you?
What actually happens is the independent service place in Brisbane that's quite famous out here in Tennyson that work on some of the most magnificent cars. So when my car's in on the hoist, look to the left and the Carrera GT, and you look to the right and there'll be a 2.7R. I mean, just amazing stuff in there.
Fantastic.
It's always an experience going in there, but I trust them to use the right, if they say we're going to have the body shop look at it, I know it's the right body shop. If they say they're going to send it over to the exhaust shop or take the exhaust off, I trust them, because they're Porsche enthusiasts, they're owners, they're really, really a great bunch of guys. And I much prefer, because of the experience I'm about to touch on, just giving if I've got having them deal with it rather than try and shop around for the less people's hands on the car at this stage, the better, as far as I'm concerned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the Gundo hack, I mean, the Gundo hack is very similar, almost the same as the Fister exhaust that I have on my car. And I know some people say that the Gundo is actually, can be a little bit louder. I'm not sure if it is or not, but some people do say that it's a louder sounding mod once you've had it done. But either or, they're both great things to do and both easy. So what else are you planning for the 996 cab? Is there anything else you'd like to do that you haven't done as yet?
Well, the roof on it maybe would be nice. It's always going to be. It's a nice Sunday car. I do sometimes daily drive it just because I like to get out in it. It's always going to be sort of limited as far as being able to track it or anything like that by it sort of being a cab. It is really a smooth car on the motorway, even with the wheels set up the way they are and the suspension. You put the windows up with the roof down, even if it's raining, as long as you're moving, you won't get wet. Like it's really, really very usable for such a sort of low, hard, stiff setup, but not uncomfortable by any means. So it's really, you can do a long drive in it and not be uncomfortable. But
I'm sure if you go to any Porsche events in Brisbane, I'm sure you get a lot of questions about it, especially when they see the GT3 seats in it as well, which is probably not a very common mod for people to do on their 996 cabs.
Well, to be fair, I'm actually looking forward to one of the events. The car, because I only have a certain number of spaces here at home, often when I know that I'm going to be particularly busy with work or I've got another car coming in, I will actually send it up to a local place that does storage, and it parks up next to a row of amazing machinery. But they actually host shows on the grounds there. So they have Porsche shows, they have all English day shows and Ferrari shows. So they're familiar with seeing the car in a different state, but nobody, like I've literally just finished it, getting it all set up and getting everything pretty much the way I like it. I want to do a full paint correction and protection. I might, one of the headlights is maybe a little bit sad. I might see if I can track something down. Every day I look for things. I'd like to do a steering wheel, Michael, but they're incredibly expensive.
Yeah, I know. They're way too expensive. I always hesitate on that. Steve always pushes me to change my steering wheel, but I hesitate because, you can pick up some cheap ones on eBay and you've probably seen them. Every now and again they appear. But, it's an expensive mod, the steering wheel, that's for sure. And which one would you get? You know what I mean? Which one would you choose?
Yeah, because I've got the 993 steering wheel because mine's one of the early years. Mine's a 3.4, so mine's the square box, pretty much one of the saddest sort of designs. Maybe it's retro cool at this point, but
So it sounds like you got it very sorted then. The hard top is always, the soft top I should say, the convertible top is always a problem with these cabs, isn't it? Because it's an expensive fix, isn't it?
Especially if you do it twice. So that's what I was going to sort of touch on, and just something that is critical, that if you have these cars and they're getting harder and harder to find secondhand parts, and it's harder for a car to be written off. Before, if you crashed a 986 Boxster, we'll sell it for parts. If you crashed a 996, beyond economic repair. They're not doing that anymore. The cars are staying on the road. They're too valuable. And as a result, secondhand parts are becoming more and more difficult to obtain, especially locally. Different in the States and stuff where you have a lot, even the UK perhaps, where there's a lot more cars. But around here, it gets harder and harder to track down bits, and it's going to be sort of, as a result, a bit more expensive to keep on the road. But what actually happened is I went to a motor trimming specialist to have the roof replaced, ordered the part in from Germany, and he replaced it in a very poor manner.
Right.
So as a result, I then had to go off to my independent specialist who was Porsche trained in roof fitting, and it took him a very, very long time to rectify it. So that was that's one of the things that it's very, very important. The trimmer was, we do Ferraris and no problems, absolutely. And it was not a good outcome.
So is it okay now? Has it been
Yeah,
rectified now?
It is, but I mean that was a very stressful experience.
Yeah, the soft top's a bit of a weird one, and I think told this story before, and I read it on Porsche's newsroom site, and it was about the Boxster, and it was about a 2002 Boxster that someone had bought, and they started going to classic shows, and they were talking about the top, and this was in Germany, right? It was a German car, and they said they didn't actually get it done by Porsche. Porsche recommended a saddlery, a place that specializes in saddles and that sort of leather good, and they did the top, which I thought was interesting. So maybe even Porsche in Germany, they don't really want to sort of mess with these tops. Maybe they are very, very hard to get them 100% right. I don't know.
No, definitely. You do. They are very, very difficult. The process is, fit, wet it, stretch it, leave it in the sun. Like it is convoluted. The thing has to be done off the car. So the moral of the story is if you own a Boxster or a 911, if you're getting your roof changed, make sure they have references and they can say, or someone that's had it done, because it is, if someone thinks they can work it out on the fly or watch YouTube, they cannot. It is very, very complicated.
Okay, so tell me about just tell me briefly, what was the 1985 Carrera that you mentioned that you had seen or passed through your hands? What was that one about?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine and actually a client of mine we helped them get into a 718 Cayman, which they didn't have for especially long time. And that is probably, they're a fine sports car and they have really good performance. The performance exceeds the sort of 981, but they are lacking a certain Porsche quality just because of the four-cylinder turbo and the noise it makes and everything. So everything else about it is the definitive Porsche, but the engine and the way it produces power and everything, just there's a disconnect. There's a bloodline that runs all the way through all these different cars that I drive, and it's missing from that particular car, I feel, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't, GTS 4 litres and everything completely different, but those 4-cylinder 718s, the 2 litres and 2.5s. But
yes,
regardless, so he had that car, wasn't super thrilled with it, and then went out and we constantly just compare notes. He was looking at 991, 991 Carrera T, all different things. To the moon and back again, we looked at everything. And then the Porsche Centre Melbourne had a immaculate, like a burgundy coloured 85 cab. And there's the cab thing again, but it's a value proposition. And this car was show quality immaculate. It had been through and it had actually been certified or some process, because the Porsche Centre Melbourne is a Porsche group-owned dealership.
Yes, they're classic specialists, right? They do all the classic restorations there. Yeah.
That's right. So they had touched the car and it was exceptional. So he bought the car sight unseen. It got shipped up here to southeast Queensland, and essentially the Porsche Centre Melbourne had a deal with Brisbane up here that if anything needed fixing on the car, if there was any rough running or any little bits and pieces, that it was going to get rectified up here. So my friend is on the Sunshine Coast. For the listeners, it's about 2 hours away, and when you're busy during the week, it's a bit of a trek to come down. And despite how hard we try, we can't drive two cars at once. It would make it would make a huge difference if we could, but it would make very difficult. So I picked the car up and I had it here for probably 3 weeks, and I drove it a fair bit with the roof up and the roof down, and really enjoyed. It's a completely different experience, but really enjoyable. And to drive a sorted one as close to new as you can imagine was definitely a privilege. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
So it was really well looked after. So what was this is the obvious question here. You've got your 996 cab at the time, right? You've got your cab.
Yep.
And then you've got the air-cooled 85 Carrera cab. What was the difference? Did it feel like a heavier car? Did it feel like a slower car? How did it feel?
Ergonomically, I fit a lot better in the newer car. There was some problems like using the clutch and then shifting into fifth gear. I sort of have to do like a two-step approach with that because of there's limited leg room. Everybody waves and smiles at you in the older car. Not the case with newer Porsches. Not everybody wants to be your friend on the road, but it was very well received, and it looked just magnificent. It has the Fuchs wheels, and the stance on the car was spot on. It was just, when you see a car of that age in that condition, everybody's interested. It's a real unifying thing.
Sorry, Luke, no wing, or did it have the wing?
No, it didn't have a wing. It was sort of like, it's a narrow body car, just a smooth, original, a period color with the period color interior, and all the roof is perfect, and just an amazing thing. Really did very well buying that car. Fantastic value transaction there, and it was really nice. But to be honest, the 996, driving them back to back, things moved on so much. The power delivery, the directness of the steering, the ability to place the car, the braking, the maneuverability, everything about it, no way you look at it is vastly superior as you move along generations, as you'd expect. So, but still enjoyable for what it is, definitely. Really
fantastic.
enjoyable.
It's great to experience anyway. At least you've experienced that air-cooled thing. So, having experienced the air-cooled 911, owning the 996, owning the Cayenne GTS, is there something else that's on your list that you'd like to get a hold of, that you'd like to buy? Are you going to keep the GTS? Are you going to keep the 996? What are the plans for the future? Anything you've been thinking about?
I've got a little bit of a list going. I believe it or not, I still want to buy a Panamera. We're big Panamera fans in the household. Okay. It's just the balance between value and age, and I would never really want to spend the prerequisite $300,000 or $400,000 to purchase a new one. And then, I don't want a diesel, and I don't want a V6, and I don't want a 12-year-old one, and I want one with warranty, so it really narrows the field. So that's something that's on there, and that would probably be more like a car that my wife has always been interested in, so that might be something that she might get into at some stage.
So would that replace the Cayenne? That would be the replacement for a Cayenne?
That might replace her BMW, to be honest. That might be, that might actually just be her everyday transport. She's had some really nice cars in the past. It's a good excuse to buy another car and just say it's hers.
Look, I like the Panamera. I know a lot of people hate it. I mean, they're very popular in Bahrain. There was a lot of them in Bahrain. A lot of them that were sort of very, very hard driven sort of cars. But I do like them. I like the GTS, the Panamera GTS. Was it 2015 model or whatever it is, something like that? I think beautiful, beautiful car.
And that's what I'm after. Essentially, would be something like that, like a 15 GTS, last of the 970 chassis, and that's a really nice car. But it combines the engine that I have in my car, in my GTS, but it has a PDK, which really unleashes that responsive performance, and it's they're beautiful cars to sit in. I mean, I've been in Panameras. They're even the back seat. They're just a really comfortable, luxurious Porsche. I mean, I think they're and for the money now, because they have depreciated quite a lot, they're a good value. Yeah, that's for sure. But it's the running costs and the conditions of that. So you just need to make sure that it's at the right place, kilometers wise, and that you're still able to utilize the Porsche warranty. I've watched the market very closely, and as soon as they come for sale, like used approved, they sell, they're gone immediately. So, so that's one. I would probably still buy a 981 if the right car came up, the right combination in a PDK, just because I really like that gearbox in that car with that engine combination, like in a like a Cayman or Boxster S. With PDK, I really like the idea of that. So just because of the value, and like probably a sports car you could own for a couple of years and sell and not really lose any money. So that would be something I'd look at. But really, what I want is a 911. The problem is the 911s. It will settle at some point, and not having to just harp on about the Australian market and alienate our international listeners. But there is a 991, a 997.2 PDK car. I would love one of those, but they seem to be more expensive than really probably what they're worth at this point.
Yeah, they're very expensive, especially if you get a Carrera S. I mean, I still like the 99. I mean, I've said this the other day. The 997.2, Carrera 2S in manual. If one came up and it wasn't too expensive, I'd definitely be tempted, because I think just that little bit of extra more power over my car, and in the upgraded 0.2. It would be tempting. It would be very tempting, but they're just way too expensive when they come up, and there's so few of them around as well, especially in manual.
What would be your comfort level there? Because they just seem to be so, like those 0.2s, because they're the last of before the 991 when the car really got big, and they're really they're going to be the ones to watch. But it's like,
but I think they're about 170,000. I think I saw one for 169,000 advertised. You know what I mean? A while back, I think it was 169 in Sydney, and I think it sold reasonably quickly. I think that's when you're getting to that price, as you know. I mean, you'd have to go into it. You'd have to look at the 991.1. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Carrera S. Definitely. I mean, yes. 991.1 Carrera S. I probably wouldn't go manual. I'd probably go PDK in the earlier models.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's. I mean, they're as you know, the prices of those are coming down. They're not coming down that quickly, though, are they? In the 991.1, I noticed that they're sort of there, but they're not there yet.
No, and prior to this little mini boom that we're having at the moment with everything, and this is everything from utes to anything and everything in Australia in automotive context has just had a spike. I've had customers that have paid $100,000 for Land Cruisers 3 months ago and just sold them for a $30,000 profit. Like it's unseen circumstances over here at the moment. But
and globally as well, though, Luke. You know what I mean? Or I think everywhere. I mean, this whole car market has just gone due to COVID, and Australia is actually okay at the moment, but due to COVID, the car market has just gone crazy. Whether or not it's classic cars or especially cars from the 80s and 90s, as we know. I mean, it's just gone insane. Japanese cars, everything.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find a bargain at the moment, that's for sure. So just we're getting to the end of the podcast because we'd like to keep these to an hour, but just tell the listeners, people who are in Brisbane and they want to, so you mainly find new cars for people, right? Not necessarily used cars.
Yeah, well, our service is Australia-wide, but basically how it works is, if you have an idea for a car, our service is free. You can contact us through the website or through Instagram. All our details are on there, and we can just talk through the process, the same as if you were looking for real estate or some other things. And basically just because of sort of my experience of knowing the model range of all the different makes and what makes, ownership experience pleasant. So we handle everything from finding the car, financing the car, giving you advice in anything that you want advice in. Some people come to us and they know exactly what they want and the color, and they just want us to try and objectively get the best price, and we're happy to do that too. But some people come and they don't even know what sort of car they want, and we help, and we buy everything from high level sports cars and luxury cars to basic utes, fleet customers, and everything in between. But we don't generally look at used cars because we want happy customers all the time, and we want them to be able to have a commodity that's backed by the brand, and they can enjoy their ownership experience.
So basically you're sourcing, you help people find these cars that could be in a dealer in Australia, which is like hidden somewhere in the country or something like that. So you have the process where you go through and source new cars in stock, or is it about helping people spec out or option their new car?
It's all of the above. So it's anything to do with how they want to structure their payments, what makes sense, how much the car could potentially be worth down the road. We have a buying advantage. So if you walked in off the street and wanted to buy, say, a new Mazda for yourself because you needed a family car and you wanted a CX-5, well, as a company, we buy a new Mazda, it could be multiple times a month. So we have a relationship there that we can get a buying advantage, and we can sort of pass those savings on. So no cost to the person that's looking for a car. It's, we're paid by the dealer on the successful completion of a deal. And it doesn't always even get to that point if they just, want to talk through a process and you're 12 months down the track, you want to look at something, or it's basically an excuse for me in a professional stance to do something that I was doing constantly with everybody I knew, and that's talk about cars and buying cars.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah. All right, so I'll just remind that to the listeners, if you're in Australia and you want to get in contact with Luke, just go to New Car Concierge on Instagram and send him a DM. That's probably the best way to do it. So Luke, people, when people can come back to Australia, when Australia lets us back in, coming to Brisbane, what is your favourite road? Where is a road where you would say let's take the 911? What's your favourite road around the Queensland area, or even in Australia? What's your favourite road that you've driven your 911 on, or you'd like to drive it on?
Well, it's a little sort of slim pickings because of the strong police presence. Not that I advocate speeding in any way, shape, or form, but as far as doing some spirited driving, certainly if you're coming to Brisbane and you don't have a long time to go on a big tour, there's lots of country destinations that are, that make for nice relaxing drives. But we have the combination of Mount Nebo and Mount Glorious, which is it's just outside the city. You probably get the whole drive done in an hour and a half, and it's a combination of just hairpin corners and blind crests and sweeping sort of things, and the posted speed limits are very close to most people's level of comfort. So as long as you don't go at a very busy time, it's always a really pleasant experience. You go out there with some mates and use some walkie-talkies and just act responsibly, but you can really test your car out and position yourself in the queue wherever you feel most comfortable. But I mean, that's something like that you wouldn't expect. So my Cayenne has been out on that trip numerous times, and it shines in that environment. It sounds amazing driving through the mountains, bouncing the exhaust off the rocks, but it just handles really well and stops fantastically, and it keeps up with a lot of sports cars. So it's rewarding around there. So
all right, good. Fantastic, good tip. All right, Luke, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on PorscheCooled Owner Stories today and telling everyone about your story. It was a good one.
All right, well, thanks very much for having me. We are all myself and all my Porsche fans and owners here in Brisbane. We're thoroughly enjoying listening to you and how much the podcast has grown. So congratulations, and you put in a tremendous amount of work. So it's certainly any rewards will be very well worth it.
Thanks, Luke. That's great. Thank you so much. All right. So like I said, that's it for PorscheCooled Owner Stories today. Don't forget to follow Luke at New Car Concierge. Thanks for listening, everyone, and bye for now.